This is video 2, looking at unemployment, and here I'm going to look at what governments can do to deal with issues of unemployment. Okay, so the first 3 things that governments do is to try and get more females into the workforce, to help to support older workers, and to improve the participation of those who are disabled or sick. So let's have a look at the first one. When your grandparents or your parents had their children, you would probably have found that the mother stayed at home, and for sometimes that could have been for 4 years, maybe 10 years. Even when I had my son 13 years ago, I stayed at home for 9 months, whereas when I had my daughter, I only stayed at home for about 4. Why? What's the reason? Well, there's been a massive change in flexibility, which means to try and persuade more females or people that would stay at home with their children to get back into the workforce. So when I had my daughter, I was allowed to apply for flexible working. And what that meant was I could go back to work 4 days a week and have an extra day off with her at home. Now this persuaded me, rather than taking a year off, to just take a few months off, because I was able to then do a 4-day week for a few years, supporting education, supporting my students and spending that extra time with my daughter. Now this flexible working requirement has only come in the last few years, and what it's meant is that firms have to tell somebody why they can't have flexible working, not if they can, why they can't, and that put the onus on the business that they should be providing flexible working. The more people we can keep in the workforce, the more productive that we can be. And during the coronavirus, what we found is a lot of people have found working from home can improve productivity, decrease productivity. It all depends on what the environment is and the job that you've got. But again, we should see an increase in flexibility in the workforce over the next few years. Next thing, retirement age. There's been a huge change in people's attitude for those who are older. And there's been a massive change in the government's attitude towards retirement. As we've talked about in the past, if you live for 80 years, the first 20 years you're in education and then you retire at 60, it's only actually meant that half of your life you're producing anything. So only half of your life are you productive, which causes huge issues for the rest of the society as they have to produce the goods and services which you want and allow for you to have income from the government. So what the government's done is that they've increased the retirement age and allowed more older people to stay in work, because firstly, the more you produce, the richer we are as an economy. And secondly, because many people at the age of 65 just were not ready for retirement. They had great skills that everyone else wanted in society, and there was no reason for them to retire. Think about somebody like B&Q. If you want to plaster a wall, or you want to understand the best way to deal with some pipe work, you might go into B&Q and speak to members of staff there. Now, they may have been plumbers, labourers, brickies in the past, and they've got all those skills. They might not still be able to do that labour-intensive job, but they've got the skills to help other people. So those skills are really, really marketable and really profitable for someone like B&Q, and it really provides them with their USP. And finally, actually, participation of those that are sick and disabled. So up to a few years ago, there really was this feeling that those people who were sick and disabled were given benefits because they weren't able to work. But the government's changed the opinion and now say, what is it you can do? Now, whilst this seems like really, really obvious in theory, actually how it's been put into practice has been incredibly problematic. And people who are disabled, who aren't able to produce to do many jobs in the workforce, have been forced off benefits which they needed because they weren't able to work, but the jobs they were provided with really were not suitable. So this bottom one here is a really good example of, in theory, is a great idea, but in practice has been really poorly implemented. I would keep off this one in my exam, but definitely talk about the first 2. Migration. So always and everywhere is a benefit to the UK economy, because people who migrate to the UK provide skills, and they also demand the goods and services which we in the economy produce. As you know, migration is always and everywhere a benefit. And we can show this actually in a diagram. When you have an increase in supply of labour through the migration, wage levels start to fall, which means we have falling inflation, we have more access to goods and services, improving standards of living, and finally it means we can sell more abroad because our goods and services are cheaper. The argument that this depresses people's wages only holds if people do not try and reskill to become more productive. And it is clearly the case that if wages are falling in your sector, then it is on you, it is your onus to go out and to reskill, which allows you to have better qualifications and skills than others to be more productive, and therefore your wage levels will increase because the elasticity of demand of your labour will change. Okay? All right? So we do not accept this idea that this is bad. It is always and everywhere good. Skills. Okay. So the government's really tried to change actually the skills that we have as factors of production. So what they've tried to do is, over the last few years, they've increased computing education, they've changed the A-levels, they've changed the GCSEs, made them much more difficult, they've gone from 4 to 3 A-levels, etc, etc. And most recently, there's been a real push towards vocational and T-levels, because what the government realises is that people don't necessarily have the skills that employers need being taught to people at school. And so what they're trying to do is develop more, as I say, vocational qualifications, entrepreneurship, engineering, computer-based sciences, developed at school, providing us with the skills that we need as a workforce. Now this is problematic and is something that will take years and years to change culture. If I spoke to your grandparents or your parents, some of them may not have gone to university because that's not what people like us did, is often what's said. And if I say to students now about going to university, many are now convinced that that's the only way forward. And the reason for them is because their grandparents felt that somehow their income had been kept behind because they didn't have a degree, and they want their grandchildren or their children to benefit from high income, which comes with perceived a degree. And that's just not the case as much anymore. T-levels, vocational qualifications, apprenticeships often provide people with really high quality jobs in the future, and therefore it will take a cultural change for people to say that it's not just university degrees, it's these other vocational degrees to what we need as a society. So, last thing, cost of unemployment. Now this is pretty straightforward and most of you wouldn't even need me to go through them, so I'm just going to go through them pretty quickly. So the first cost of unemployment is obviously a fall in income, a stigma, and also actually a loss of confidence or expertise, particularly if you're long-term unemployed. So as I said to you before, when I was frictionally unemployed for 3 hours, there was no change in my experience or commitment or motivation for work from losing one job and getting the next. But actually, if you're out of work for a year, 2 years, 3 years, there can be a real feeling that you just can't reskill, you can't move forward, you're not part of the workforce anymore. We call this hysteresis in economics, and it is a huge problem. Next one, local communities. Well, if you're suffering from structural unemployment, maybe in like Wigan or South Wales, but actually structural unemployment can be very severe for local communities because it creates a long-term decrease in income for all around, but might not be, like my mum, in somewhere like Manchester. So for the government, it creates issues in relation to universal credit payments increase, and there's a decrease in tax revenue. For the economy, there's a decrease in output. Okay, obviously we see for the diagram like this, decrease in output. Okay, and maybe other social problems from unemployment. Okay, maybe it costs to retrain people or support them into new jobs. As consumers, consumption will fall. Why? Because people's disposable income is going to fall. That's going to affect firms too. And finally, as we come on to firms, actually, obviously we might find that they see there's less demand because of consumers consuming less. But actually, sometimes firms see unemployment as a good thing. So before the coronavirus, up to a few months before, my husband's main issue at work was not being able to get enough factors of production people to work for them. However, now, because unemployment started to rise, if he needed to take more people on, he could do it cheaper because there's far more people available for work. So actually, perversely, unemployment can be a positive thing for firms because it allows their costs to fall. And what I've just written here underneath is, in green, it's very difficult to write an essay on this subject and not sound like you're ranting. Each point must be about economics and not sound like it's a news article. Okay, so these two videos, very brief overview over unemployment. Thank you.